everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm Emma, and today we are diving into something that is deeply embedded in American culture, basketball. And I've got Jake with me today, who I know is genuinely passionate about this topic. Jake, how are you feeling about today's conversation?
Honestly, Emma, I've been looking forward to this one. Basketball is one of those subjects where the more you pull at the thread, the more fascinating it gets. It's sport, it's history, it's fashion, it's social politics, it's music. It's this whole ecosystem that's worth unpacking properly.
That's a great way to frame it. An ecosystem. Everything is connected. And I think that's exactly why it works so well as a cultural topic, not just a sports topic. So let's start at the foundation. Where does basketball actually come from? And why does it feel so distinctly American?
So the origin story is surprisingly specific. Basketball was invented in December 1891 by a man named James Naismith, who was a Canadian-American physical education instructor working at a YMCA in Springfield, Massachusetts. He was tasked with creating an indoor activity that would keep students physically engaged during the winter months, and he essentially invented the sport in an afternoon.
Which is remarkable when you think about it. One of the most globally recognized sports was essentially a practical solution to a scheduling problem. He wasn't trying to create a cultural phenomenon.
Not at all. He wrote up 13 basic rules, nailed a peach basket, a literal fruit basket, to an elevated indoor track. And that was it. The first version of basketball used an actual peach basket, with the bottom still intact, which meant every time someone scored, someone had to climb up and fish the ball out.
That must have killed the momentum of the game completely. Imagine scoring and then just waiting for someone to retrieve the ball.
It was wonderfully chaotic, but it didn't take long before someone had the sensible idea of cutting the bottom out of the basket to let the ball fall through. And from that rather humble beginning, the sport expanded rapidly across YMCAs, universities, and communities throughout North America, and eventually the world.
And it feels distinctly American, I think, because of how it grew. Through community centers, urban playgrounds, school gymnasiums, it became woven into the social fabric of American life in a way that felt organic rather than imposed.
That's a really insightful point. Basketball particularly took root in urban America, cities like New York, Chicago, Philadelphia, Los Angeles. And in those environments, it became more than just a sport. It became a form of expression. A way for communities, particularly Black communities, to develop culture and identity. That history is inseparable from what basketball is today.
And we'll get into that deeper cultural dimension as we go. But first, let's orient listeners who might be unfamiliar with the structure of professional basketball in America. The NBA. What is it, and why does it matter?
So the NBA, the National Basketball Association, is the premier professional basketball league in the world. It was founded in 1946, has 30 franchises, teams, split between the Eastern and Western conferences, and it operates on an annual cycle. The regular season runs from October through April, with each team playing 82 games, and then the top teams from each conference advance to the playoffs.
82 games is a grueling schedule. That's essentially playing almost every other day for 6 months.
It is relentless, which is actually one of the ongoing debates in basketball, whether the regular season is too long and too taxing on players. You'll hear analysts talk about load management, which is the practice of deliberately resting star players in regular season games to keep them healthy for the playoffs. Fans who've paid to see a certain player sometimes show up and find out he's been rested, which understandably causes frustration.
That tension between player welfare and fan expectations is an interesting one. It shows how professional sports exist at the intersection of athletics and business. It's not purely about the game itself.
Exactly. The NBA is a multi-billion-dollar entertainment industry, and every decision, player contracts, scheduling, broadcasting rights, is made with that commercial reality in mind.
The finals alone generates extraordinary advertising revenue and global viewership.
Let's talk about the finals, because for listeners who don't follow basketball, the NBA Finals is that culminating event, the championship series, that even non-fans tend to be aware of. How does it work, and why is it such a cultural moment?
So after the playoffs, which is a single elimination bracket tournament, meaning one loss and your season is over, the last two teams standing, one from the East and one from the West, play each other in a best-of-7 series. The first team to win 4 games wins the championship. And whoever performs best throughout that series typically wins the Finals MVP award.
And culturally, it becomes this enormous event. You mentioned it's comparable to the Super Bowl in terms of its cultural reach. Even people who've never watched a regular season game will tune in for the finals.
Absolutely. Celebrities fill the courtside seats. And courtside, just to clarify, means the premium seats right at the edge of the playing court, which can cost thousands of dollars per game. There's pre-game entertainment, post-game celebrations, and the media coverage is relentless. It transcends sport and becomes a genuine cultural moment.
Okay, I want to get into the players now, because I think this is where basketball becomes truly fascinating from a cultural standpoint. The NBA has produced figures who are larger than life, not just athletes, but icons. Where do we even begin?
There's only one place to begin, and that's Michael Jordan. He played primarily for the Chicago Bulls from 1984 to 1998, with a couple of brief retirements in between, and he is almost universally regarded as the greatest basketball player of all time. 6 championships, 6 Finals MVP awards, 5 regular season MVP awards. The statistics are extraordinary.
And beyond the statistics, Jordan had this aura, this almost mythological quality that made him feel like something beyond a regular athlete, even while he was still playing.
He had a rare combination of supreme physical gifts and an almost frightening competitive drive. His former teammates and opponents have described playing against him as a uniquely intimidating experience. He was relentless, completely uncompromising in his pursuit of winning. That intensity was both what made him great and, by all accounts, occasionally difficult to be around.
The price of greatness, perhaps. And then there's his cultural impact off the court. The Air Jordan brand with Nike is one of the most extraordinary examples of athlete as brand in history.
It really is unprecedented in scale. When Nike signed Jordan in 1984, he was a rookie, and the deal was considered risky. But the Air Jordan sneaker line became a phenomenon almost immediately. It generated $1 million in revenue in the first month. Today, Jordan Brand is a subsidiary of Nike worth several $billion annually, and the iconic Jumpman logo, that silhouette of Jordan leaping toward the basket, is one of the most recognized symbols in global consumer culture.
And the sneaker culture that grew out of that, people collecting, reselling, obsessing over Air Jordans, that's a whole subculture that Jordan essentially catalyzed, even if he didn't intend to.
He ignited something that took on a life of its own entirely. Sneaker culture today, the limited releases, the resale market, the streetwear aesthetic, has direct roots in that moment in 1984 when Jordan and Nike partnered up. And the fashion implications spread globally, far beyond anyone who follows basketball.
Okay, let's talk about LeBron James, because the Jordan versus LeBron debate is essentially a permanent feature of American sports culture at this point.
It is genuinely inexhaustible as a debate. LeBron entered the NBA in 2003, directly from high school. He was so highly touted that he was nicknamed the Chosen One by Sports Illustrated before he played a single professional game. He's since won 4 championships with 3 different franchises, the Cleveland Cavaliers, Miami Heat, and Los Angeles Lakers, which demonstrates an adaptability and longevity that's arguably unmatched in NBA history.
And the case for LeBron over Jordan rests significantly on his consistency across 2 decades, right? He's maintained an elite level of performance far longer than most players.
That's the crux of it. Jordan's peak may have been higher, but LeBron's sustained excellence over 20-plus years is extraordinary. He's still performing at an all-star level in his late 30s, which physiologically shouldn't really be possible at the intensity of NBA basketball. He's clearly done something remarkable in terms of maintaining his body and his game.
And LeBron, like Jordan, has transcended sport in a significant way, but in a distinctly different direction. He's become a prominent social and political voice.
Quite deliberately so. LeBron has been outspoken on racial justice, voting rights, education access, and political issues in ways that have sometimes drawn criticism from people who feel athletes should stay in their lane, meaning stick to sports and not venture into political commentary.
And he famously reframed that criticism. Someone once told him to shut up and dribble, essentially dismissing his right to have a political opinion. And he turned that phrase into the title of a documentary and a point of pride.
Which was a masterful move, honestly, taking a dismissive remark and transforming it into a statement of purpose. He's also founded a public school in his hometown of Akron, Ohio, the I Promise School, which serves underprivileged youth and provides not just education, but housing support, meals, and family services. It's a genuinely substantive contribution beyond the typical celebrity foundation model.
Let's talk about Kobe Bryant, because his story carries an enormous emotional weight in American culture, particularly after his death in January 2020.
Kobe is a deeply significant figure, and his passing was one of those collective grief moments where an entire nation, and really much of the world, stopped and mourned together. He played 20 seasons exclusively for the Los Angeles Lakers, which, in the modern era of player movement between teams, is itself remarkable. 5 championships, 2 finals MVPs, 1 regular season MVP.
And the Mamba mentality, that philosophy he articulated, has arguably had as much cultural impact as his basketball career.
It really has. Mamba mentality, named after his self-given nickname, the Black Mamba, inspired by a highly lethal African snake known for its speed and precision, was Kobe's framework for approaching any pursuit with obsessive dedication, continuous self-improvement, and absolute refusal to accept mediocrity. He wrote a book about it, he spoke about it extensively, and it resonated far beyond sports, in business, academia, creative fields.
There's something about the specificity and sincerity of how he articulated it that made it feel more than just a motivational slogan. He clearly lived it.
He was notoriously the first one in the gym and the last to leave, often arriving at 4 or 5 in the morning. Multiple stories from former teammates confirm it wasn't a manufactured image. He was genuinely that obsessive about his craft. And when he died, along with his daughter Gianna and 7 others in that helicopter crash, the grief was compounded by the sense of a story that felt incomplete, a second chapter as a father and mentor that was just beginning.
It's one of those losses that still feels very present, I think. Okay, let's broaden the scope and talk about basketball at the community level, because the NBA is the pinnacle, but basketball's cultural reach operates at every level of American life.
This is so important to understand. Basketball is genuinely accessible in a way that many sports aren't. All you need is a ball and a hoop. You'll find outdoor courts in virtually every American city, often in public parks, and they're free to use. In urban neighborhoods, the local basketball court has historically been a community gathering point, a place where people from all walks of life converge.
And that accessibility has made it a meritocratic, open to everyone based on ability rather than background, pathway for a lot of young people. The idea that talent and hard work on the court can create opportunities regardless of your socioeconomic circumstances.
Right, though it's worth noting that the odds of making it to the NBA are extraordinarily slim. There are only about 450 active roster spots in the entire league. But the aspiration itself and the culture built around pursuing that aspiration shapes communities deeply. Youth leagues, pickup games, high school programs, they all carry genuine cultural weight.
High school basketball in particular is a massive deal in certain states. Indiana is the example that always comes up.
Indiana has this almost sacred relationship with basketball. The term Hoosier hysteria refers to the obsessive enthusiasm for high school basketball throughout the state. Small towns where almost nothing else happens will fill their gymnasiums on Friday nights for high school games. There's even a 1986 film, Hoosiers, about a small Indiana school that makes an improbable run to the state championship. And it's considered one of the greatest sports films ever made precisely because it captures that authentic community-level passion.
And then there's college basketball, which deserves its own conversation because March Madness is one of the most remarkable annual cultural events in America.
March Madness, the NCAA tournament, is something genuinely special. 68 college teams qualify for a single elimination tournament that runs over approximately 3 weeks in March, concluding in early April. Single elimination means one loss and you're done. There's no second chance, no consolation bracket. Every game carries existential stakes for the teams involved.
And the bracket, the practice of predicting outcomes, becomes this national obsession that extends well beyond sports fans.
It's extraordinary how widely it permeates American life. Millions of people fill out brackets every year. A bracket being the visual chart where you predict which teams will advance through each round. Office pools, family competitions, online bracket contests. It's estimated that Americans fill out around 60 to 70 million brackets annually.
And statistically speaking, the probability of filling out a perfect bracket is essentially zero, right?
The odds are approximately 1 in 9 quintillion. That's a 9 followed by 18 zeros. To put that in perspective, you're significantly more likely to be struck by lightning multiple times than to predict a perfect bracket. And yet people try every year, which is part of the beautiful absurdity of it.
There's something very human about that, attempting the statistically impossible with genuine optimism.
And the reason perfect brackets are essentially impossible is the upsets. An upset, when a lower-ranked, less-favored team defeats a heavily favored opponent, is practically guaranteed to happen multiple times in each tournament. A number 1 seed losing to a number 16 seed, the lowest-ranked team, happened for the first time ever in 2018 when UMBC defeated Virginia, and people genuinely lost their minds over it.
That must have obliterated millions of brackets simultaneously.
Simultaneously. And spectacularly. But that's the intoxicating, irresistibly compelling quality of March Madness. The chaos is the product. The unpredictability is what makes it compelling even to people who couldn't name a starting lineup.
Let's talk about basketball and language, because this is something our listeners will find particularly useful. The degree to which basketball vocabulary has infiltrated, worked its way into everyday American English.
This is one of my favorite linguistic observations. Countless phrases that Americans use in completely non-basketball contexts have their origins in the sport. Slam dunk is probably the most obvious. In basketball, it describes forcefully driving the ball down through the hoop from above. But in everyday speech, it means a certainty, a guaranteed success. That proposal is a slam dunk, means it's going to be approved without question.
And listeners, if you're in a professional environment in America, meetings, presentations, negotiations, you will hear slam dunk regularly. It's completely embedded in business language.
Then there's full court press, which describes a defensive strategy where your team pressures the opponents across the entire length of the court, rather than just near your own basket. In general English, if someone is applying a full court press in a negotiation or a pursuit, it means they're exerting intense, relentless pressure on all fronts simultaneously.
In the zone is another one that's completely crossed over. In basketball, it describes a player who's in a state of extraordinary flow. Everything is working, every shot is going in, their decision-making feels effortless. But you'd hear someone say they were in the zone while writing a report, cooking a meal, or playing a video game.
And nothing but net. When a shot goes through the hoop without touching the rim or the backboard, purely through the net, cleanly, is used colloquially to mean something went flawlessly, no complications, a clean and perfect execution. The presentation went nothing but net. Perfect. No problems.
These crossovers demonstrate how deeply basketball has penetrated the cultural subconscious. It's not just something people watch, it's shaped how Americans think and speak.
And that linguistic influence extends globally now, which is an interesting marker of the sport's international reach. Someone in Tokyo or Lagos might use slam dunk in an English conversation without having any particular connection to the NBA.
Speaking of cultural penetration, the relationship between basketball and hip-hop is something we really need to address, because it's one of the most significant cultural pairings in American history.
It's symbiotic, mutually beneficial, and deeply interconnected. Both basketball and hip-hop emerged prominently from urban Black American communities in roughly the same era, and they grew up together, culturally speaking. The aesthetics overlap, the style, the swagger, the competitive individualism within a team context, the emphasis on authentic self-expression. They reinforce each other.
And the personnel overlap is remarkable. Hip-hop artists are openly and enthusiastically basketball fans, and many of them have formalized that connection through team ownership and investment. Jay-Z had a stake in the Brooklyn Nets. Diddy has been involved in team pursuits. Drake is essentially the unofficial cultural ambassador of the Toronto Raptors. He's at almost every home game, courtside, visibly emotional throughout, and the cameras love him for it. His presence has arguably elevated the Raptors' global cultural profile beyond what their on-court performance alone would generate. Drake, courtside, is genuinely its own recurring cultural phenomenon at this point. His facial expressions during tense games have become meme material.
Extensively documented and widely enjoyed. But beneath the celebrity spectacle, there's something substantive happening. Music artists see basketball as culturally aligned with their world in a way that, say, golf or tennis isn't. The energy, the urban roots, the global youth appeal, it all maps onto hip-hop culture naturally.
And the fashion dimension, which we touched on with Air Jordan, goes so much deeper than one brand. Basketball culture essentially gave birth to what we now call streetwear as a global aesthetic.
The oversized jerseys, the sneakers, the shorts, the caps, that visual language originated in basketball culture, migrated into hip-hop, and from hip-hop expanded into global mainstream fashion. You'll find that aesthetic in high-end designer collections now. Balenciaga, Off-White, Louis Vuitton have all incorporated streetwear elements that trace their lineage back to basketball courts in American cities.
It's a remarkable journey from a peach basket in Springfield, Massachusetts, to a Louis Vuitton runway. Let's talk about the international dimension of the modern NBA, because basketball has become genuinely global in a way that feels irreversible.
The transformation has been dramatic. In the 1992 Olympics, the United States assembled what became known as the Dream Team, featuring Jordan, Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, and other NBA superstars playing in international competition for the first time. They dominated every opponent by enormous margins. But more importantly, they broadcast the spectacle of elite NBA basketball to a global audience simultaneously.
And that was arguably the moment basketball's international expansion became inevitable. Millions of people around the world saw that level of play and wanted access to it regularly.
The floodgates opened from there. International players began entering the NBA in greater numbers through the 1990s and 2000s, and today over 100 players in the league were born outside the United States. The talent is genuinely distributed globally now.
Let's talk about some of the current international stars, because they're not just good, they're arguably the best players in the world right now.
Nikola Jokic from Serbia, who plays for the Denver Nuggets, is a 3-time most valuable player and is widely considered the best basketball player in the world at this moment. And what makes him remarkable isn't just his excellence, it's the completely unconventional way he achieves it. He's a center, typically the biggest, most physically dominant player on the court, but he plays with the vision and ball distribution skills of a point guard, traditionally the smallest, most playmaking-oriented position.
Point guard, for listeners, is typically the player who runs the offense, directing teammates, initiating plays, making split-second decisions. Having those qualities in the biggest player on the court is quite unusual.
Genuinely unprecedented at that level. Then there's Victor Wembanyama from France, who plays for the San Antonio Spurs, and is perhaps the most anatomically unusual player the sport has ever seen. He's 7 feet and 4 inches tall. That's about 2 meters 24, with a wingspan that's even more extraordinary than his height, and he moves and handles the ball with the fluidity you'd expect from a player a foot shorter.
I've watched highlights of him, and there's something almost uncanny about it. Your brain keeps telling you a player that size shouldn't be able to do those things.
That's a very common reaction. LeBron James himself called Wembanyama an alien, meaning something that doesn't conform to earthly physical expectations. And that description has stuck because it captures something real. He represents a genuinely new frontier for what a basketball player can be.
And Giannis Antetokounmpo from Greece, the 2-time MVP who won a championship with the Milwaukee Bucks in 2021, his story is also extraordinary on a human level beyond just the basketball.
His background is remarkable. He grew up in Athens in very difficult economic circumstances. His parents had emigrated from Nigeria, and the family faced genuine financial hardship. He was selling things on the street as a teenager to help support his family. Within a decade, he was the best basketball player in the world. It's the kind of story that resonates universally because it speaks to something fundamental about human potential and perseverance.
And his last name, Antetokounmpo, became famous for how often American commentators struggled to pronounce it, which he's handled with good humor.
He's been very gracious about it. For the record, it's approximately Antetokounmpo. But yes, the commentary struggles in his early career were well documented. He's since embraced it as part of his identity.
Let's talk about the WNBA briefly, because it would be a genuine omission to discuss basketball culture without mentioning the women's game, which has had a remarkable moment of visibility recently.
The WNBA, Women's National Basketball Association, was founded in 1996 and has operated for nearly 3 decades, often without the mainstream attention it deserved. But in 2024, with the arrival of Caitlin Clark from Iowa, who had broken nearly every scoring record in college basketball history, the league experienced a surge in viewership, attendance, and cultural conversation that was genuinely unprecedented.
And Clark's impact was interesting because it sparked conversations about visibility, media coverage, and the commercial undervaluation of women's sports that went beyond basketball specifically.
It opened up a really substantive national dialogue. Her games were drawing television ratings that rivaled NBA games. Arenas were selling out in cities that had never previously had strong WNBA attendance. It demonstrated that the appetite for women's basketball had always existed. It had simply been undersupported by media and investment.
Which is an important distinction between audiences not caring and audiences not being given sufficient access and coverage. Those are very different things.
Precisely. And the investment picture is slowly changing. Several NBA team owners have recently purchased WNBA franchises, which brings both financial resources and operational expertise that the league has historically lacked.
Okay, let's wrap up with something practical for our listeners. If someone has been listening to this conversation and is now genuinely curious about basketball, where would you tell them to start?
I'd say skip the regular season initially and go straight to a playoff game, ideally a Game 7, which is the decisive final game of a playoff series when the teams are tied 3 wins apiece. The tension in a Game 7 is extraordinary, and that intensity is immediately comprehensible even to someone who barely knows the rules.
Because the emotional stakes are clear, even without deep basketball knowledge.
Exactly. You can feel what losing means.
You can see it in the player's body language, in the crowd's reaction. And from there, if you're drawn in, then you start following a team. You start learning the rules in depth. You start appreciating the tactical nuances, the pick and roll plays, the defensive schemes, the coaching adjustments. It reveals layers the more you understand.
And for the English learning dimension of that, watching games is actually fantastic listening practice because the commentary is fast, idiomatic, and authentic American English.
And you'll hear all those phrases we discussed, the slam dunks and full court presses, used naturally in context, which is always the best way to internalize vocabulary.
Jake, I have to say, this conversation genuinely exceeded my expectations, and I had high expectations going in. Basketball as a topic opens up into history, race, language, fashion, music, global culture. It's endlessly rich.
It really is. And I think that's ultimately what makes it such a compelling lens through which to understand America. It holds a mirror up to so many different aspects of American life simultaneously. The aspiration, the commerce, the inequality, the artistry, the community. It's all there on the court if you know how to look for it.
That is a beautiful note to end on. To everyone listening, thank you so much for spending this time with us. I hope this gave you not just a richer understanding of basketball, but also a deeper appreciation of how sport and culture are always intertwined in ways worth examining. If this episode sparked your curiosity, go watch a game, explore some of the history we mentioned, and pay attention to the language around you. You'll start hearing basketball everywhere. Take care of yourselves, keep learning, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.
Thanks, everyone, and go find yourself a Game 7. You won't regret it. Bye.